Ready? Good evening and welcome to the Fredonia Central School District Board of Education meeting for November 28th, 2023. We start every meeting with a pledge to our flag, and he doesn't know it yet, but we always start the meetings with a pledge to allegiance. If Miriam Labar, our senior, would come forward and lead us in the pledge. Right up here, Miriam. That's good. Yeah. Okay?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You can't go anywhere without this. Thank you very much. So we have an agenda with a consent agenda. The adoption of the consent agenda upon a motion and a second and affirmative vote by members present approves each and every item so designated, rather than going through every one individually. So we have a, I guess if I were Yogi Berra, I would say we have a, there isn't much on the agenda, but there's a lot on the agenda, right? Okay, so if I could get a motion, if anybody would like something pulled from the consent, we can do that after it's on the table. Can I have a motion?
Second.
Okay. Ms. Hines-Morrison, do you want to make a change or a
Yes, notification
edit?
to the minutes. Yes.
Okay.
As before we approve the minutes from the November 14th meeting, in section 9 personnel, section C, there was a typographical error. Dorothy Johnson effective date should be October 11th, which is what you see in these corrected minutes, not the 30th, which is what was originally spoken at the last meeting. Thank you.
Okay, so that will prevent us from having to correct it in the future meetings.
Correct.
So by approving it this way, but just so everyone understands that that is modified. Okay. If everyone is okay with that, is there anything anyone would like pulled out of consent? If not, then all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. The board is reserved this time to hear comments from the audience. Those wishing to address the board are asked to stand, give their name and address, and limit their comments to 5 minutes or less per individual or group. Concerns and comments during this session should be directly related to items listed on the proposed agenda for this meeting. Audience members seeking a response should complete a board correspondence sheet and return it to our district clerk. Is there anyone who would like to address the board tonight? Yes.
Hi.
There's a microphone here. If you would just state your name and address, please.
I can be loud. It's on. I'm really tall for this. Hi, good evening. My name is Christy Leone. I am a parent of Eliana Leone, who lives, we live at 122 Clinton Avenue here in Fredonia. She is a first grader here at the Fredonia School District. And I see on the agenda there's going to be a presentation from Long Architecture. And I was hoping that during that presentation or in the planning phase of the capital projects, the accessibility of the school playground is addressed. It's currently not accessible. My daughter does have some accessibility needs, uses a wheelchair, and of course, just to remind everybody, accessibility does actually work for everybody, so it would be a really nice way to show that the district is, really serving all of their students. And so hopefully as things are, I did hear comment that the school playground is likely in need of being replaced anyways. So I'm hoping that if that is part of the capital projects that is it's replaced with an accessible playground. Thank you.
Now, your concerns are for the Wheelock playground?
No, I'm sorry, I'm talking about if the district were willing to consider all of the playgrounds to be accessible within their district, I think that would show, you know, the public what a commitment there is to that. But at this point, my immediate concern is for my daughter, who is at the Fredonia School District, at this school. At the main campus.
The elementary school?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward.
Yeah, thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to address the board tonight? Okay. We have the minutes from our previous meeting, November 14th. If I could have a motion to bring those forward, please.
So
Mr. Johnston, and a second.
Second.
Mr. Marshall. And along with that edit that we heard earlier, are there any other questions, concerns? All those in favor of approval signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Next, we have a special presentation from Young and Wright Architectural for our 22 and 23 capital outlay projects, but also the building condition survey and long-term planning. The next step.
Plenty of things to discuss tonight.
Yeah, just as a little intro, first of all, thank you for everybody who's here tonight, and this is Leon, thank you for kind of getting us going. Please know that tonight's presentation is a little bit more general about the process, and really, although it feels like a little bit of an ending to something because we are officially getting the data from the building condition survey, it's really a beginning of a conversation about once we get a chance to grapple with and understand the data that we're getting, what will be the things that we prioritize in terms of our facilities across the board. I see that could involve playgrounds, it could involve our music suite or auditorium, athletic fields. Any of those things are all up for consideration here. And please know this won't be your only chance to express yourself or share some thoughts. So tonight we're going to kind of have a general understanding of some of the feedback, but also a little bit more about the larger process. We're going to have a board workshop coming up where we, as a governance team, start to sift through this information, but then we're going to be inviting people back to open forums where people can just come and share either their experience or what they're hoping to see or what they believe would be a valid use of our resources as we start to piece a capital project together. A few board meetings ago, we put at least a tentative timeline together, and we'd be looking at taking something potentially to the public for consideration around this time next year. So there's a lot involved in the conversation, a lot of considerations, and we're going to take our time and try to make the best decisions we can based on the information we have in the moment. Tonight we have Sean right here, Melissa Caitland, also Christina Weber, who are part of our architectural firm that we have been really happy to work with as we start this process. They are out of Buffalo and made the trip down tonight, so thank you for being here in person.
Both of us, it's about 20 minutes, so it was not exactly the longest haul.
So why don't you guys share your presentation, and we'll have some moments here for questions, discussion, and certainly I know there could be a variety of questions. If you don't have an answer here this evening, if you could funnel that information to me and I can get it to either the board or whoever might be concerned from our community. So I'll leave it up to you guys.
All right, well, thank you for the introduction, and also thank you for having us here tonight to give you a little bit of an update. Alyssa is gonna bring you up to speed on a couple of capital outlay projects that we've been working on for the district for the last 2 years, I guess it is now. She's gonna talk a little bit about the building condition survey, the needs for it, what the state asks for, what you look for as a district, what information you're gonna get from it. And then we're gonna walk you through kind of the next steps, the things that Brad talked about that have to do with long-term planning for your district and carefully planning projects that, you know, you and your community can support moving forward that are just gonna help to continue to improve your facilities here. So, with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Alyssa, and she's gonna fill you in on what's been going on.
All right, let's have some fun. So capital outlays are something that the school district has been committed to doing. Those are $100,000 projects on an annual basis that get reimbursed the next year. And this is something that you guys haven't had an ongoing commitment to, and since you're kind of on a rotating schedule annually, there's usually two in the mix to talk about, the one that you're doing currently and the one that's on the table coming down the road. So the 2022 Wheelock entry is the one that's currently in progress and projected to wrap up here in the next couple of months. And that's providing a secure entrance at the Wheelock vestibule here that you can see in the photos. The project included adding an intercom outside the building, adding door hardware controls, adding cameras, and building in a new transaction window that will kind of create a trap, a man trap at the entry of the building, communication into the office, and then allow them to proceed into the facility. This project has definitely had its ups and downs of getting going, but right now the district has kind of locked in a very good team of contractors. They are all committed to the schedule. We've had it was worth the refresh and restart, I would say, because they are all on board. The work will begin as soon as tomorrow, I think, next Monday and Tuesday, and will be wrapped up in January by the end of the month. So you guys kind of have the whole team here on board now, and that work will, in December, you'll start to see the cameras and the transaction window go in, and then by the end of the month in January, you'll kind of have the whole package here. So that is going on well on its revised schedule. The 2023 capital outlay, so next year's $100,000 capital project is going to primarily focus on the paving at Wheelock. There's a requirement from the state to do work inside the building associated with any work outside the building, so there will be some flooring work done inside the building to replace some outdated floors, but primarily the bulk of the budget will be utilized to replace as many parking lots, areas of parking in the parking lot as possible. You guys did already do the loop as a previous capital outlay, so that part will not be redone. But there are a couple kind of other key areas, you can see those shaded on the plan in red and orange, that will be addressed with whatever the budget allows to get done at that time. The schedule for that one's going into SCD right now, so the state reviews every project that a school does for its compliancy with their building aid guidelines and with building codes. So that submission will be made this winter. The project will be bid in the spring, kind of as soon as that comes out of SCD. And then the construction schedule will kind of be a little bit to be determined. You have some flexibility to do it this summer or next summer or on a break weeks. So kind of when we get the contractor on board, we'll look at those options and kind of finalize that schedule with them. But that's, since it's a little bit weather and break dependent, we'll be kind of looking for those opportunities with the contractor. But all things going well on this one as well right now. Those are the two capital projects that are kind of in the queue. And the other piece that we have a share, like Sean mentioned and Brad, there's the building condition survey. So you guys have a requirement from the state to complete a building condition survey. Your assignment was this year. And so you've completed your requirement from the state's perspective. You do get aid on completing this. So it's basically, hey, get the information you need about your buildings. We'll give you the money to do it. And then use that to start to build a plan as a district. So it's something that the state incentivizes. So you've checked that box. As part of that, you guys probably remember a lot of this. I'm not going to spend time on it, but we brought a whole blue crew out here. If you were in the buildings at all, you probably met someone. I see a lot of nods. Yes, there were a lot of blue shirts, hats. Right now they're in winter coats, but lots of blue people around here. They were all specialized in different things. There's architects, there's engineers, and if you sat in a room all day, you probably saw a whole bunch of them because every single one of them is looking at something different because they're all different types of architects and engineers. We reviewed a whole bunch of categories that the state requires, which are all very useful: roofs, doors, floors, windows, but we also reviewed some categories that we found are very helpful when you're entering the planning phase like right now, in looking at spaces inside the building, music rooms, and looking at spaces outside the building, and looking at technology that the state hasn't just caught up to about asking yet. So there's a whole list of those on the screen that were also evaluated, but basically a comprehensive look at your facilities to evaluate what is there and the condition that it's in currently. I will say that you can only look at what exists, so the building condition survey, just something to know about its limitations, is it can't dream your dreams for you. It can only evaluate what you have and say if you replaced it, this is what it would cost, or if you have it already, here's the condition that it's in.
We've got some folks that would like you to use the microphone.
Oh yeah, I would be happy to. I think I'm shorter than her, so. All right, so as part of this process, we did come out and we started by talking to the people in your building and documenting your existing concerns. So basically we went through each facility and interviewed with the groups at those buildings to say, what are your concerns? You know, this isn't a game of
like, oh, can the architect find it, or it's really a partnership to say, all right, what do you know about the building? What do we have in our expertise that we can review the building with and build that building condition survey together to give that information to the state, but also to build the foundation for your long-term planning process. We also scanned and documented all of your existing drawings, so you now have a digital library of all of your drawings. If that doesn't excite you, it should. This means that when there's an issue, you can basically look back to something that happened in 1960 in a couple seconds of have it, rather than running down to the basement and trying to dig out a whole really old dusty roll. It's a really valuable asset to have, and that's something that you guys now have available as part of this. So the way that works is basically you can click, all right, I want to look at the drawings, I want to look at my building. This is just a demo. This is, I'm not trying to show any school's plans. And then you can click the year that you're looking at, and then click, all right, I want to see this building. And then in a couple of seconds, you're into it, rather than digging around in the basement trying to find drawings. And you can kind of instantly mark up on it and send it out as an email. Very useful tool. If you weren't excited about it before, now you are. So when we come out and do these surveys, we do look at buildings. This is just a kind of a typical example on the screen by era. So what that means is almost no building in New York State was built at one time and never had an addition ever again after that. But that also means that your building is not necessarily, when we say how are the windows at a building, that's not always a one-size-fits-all answer, right? There might be windows that are 30 years old, some that are 60 years old, and some that are 4 years old. And that means that we kind of have to look at each one of those pieces individually to really give you a comprehensive picture of what your facility looks like. So that all got turned over in a database to the school district. This is a searchable database. It's basically like Google. You can type something in and say, how are our roofs? And then you can pull up and look at all of your roofs. So I have some samples kind of snipped out of that database to show you guys tonight here. So this is kind of one entry. At the main campus, there's well over 400 entries, so you can imagine that that's a lot of data. We are not going to present all 400 tonight. But what you're looking at on the screen is one of a handful of entries for the roofs at this building. So you can see kind of like there's some barrel vaults there that existed. They're original to that portion of the building, and there's some roofing associated with that. So one typical entry will have photos, top right, floor plan, bottom right. On the left, top left, is a lot of the information that the state requires us to look at as part of the survey. Kind of identifies what the condition, what system it is, what age it is, the condition that it's in, its projected remaining useful life, and then a series of comments about it. And then in the bottom left-hand corner is a recommended replacement scope. So for each item that we evaluate, we also provide, hey, here's the type of work that it would take to put it back in kind. Now, if you said, hey, I actually don't want to put back a barrel vaulted roof, I want to put back something totally different, that's kind of that line where the BCS can't do the thinking and the planning for you, but it can look at what you have and replace it in kind. So if you said, actually, Alyssa, we want to do we want to do a massive skylight here. Okay, the BCS didn't build in the cost for that. It really just built in the cost for replacing this roof in kind. So that's where the BCS becomes a tool to use, but not necessarily a Bible to follow. Let's see, so other areas of roofing, so this is just kind of to show that example that one shot doesn't show it all. There's some other areas of roofing here, so you can see these are some older portions of roofing built up, and you can kind of see the areas on the floor plan there where they exist. Another area of roofing, so you guys have a bunch of roofing at this building that was done in 2000. You can kind of see the expansiveness of that in the areas that it covers, as well as some photos that are associated with it. Kind of continued a little bit more roofing from 2014, a small sliver was done here. And then you can see a couple of other portions were also done in 2019. So the whole goal of this tool is that when you're sitting at a table saying, okay, what are our responsibilities, to keep our buildings warm, safe, and dry across the next decade, that you can, in a couple of seconds, okay, say, how are our roofs? And you have, in like less than a minute, a summary of how the roofs are to allow you to have the tool for planning down the road. So this type of tool doesn't exist just for roofs, it exists for a whole bunch of things. So for example, we were talking about paving at Wheelock, so you can see here is all of the paving at Wheelock. You can see that chunk in blue that was redone as the capital outlay previously, and then a portion here done in red, or noted in red, that could be continued for replacement. So we also look at everything outside the building, and we also, so like here's some more sidewalks at Wheelock. Again, you can see blue and red for areas of good and bad, basically. And we do look inside the building as well, so mechanical, electrical, and plumbing systems. So this is mechanical entry down at Wheelock for the unit ventilators that are in the classrooms, and looking at the status of, the condition of those and the consideration for those. So basically a massive encompassing database and tool that you can use for planning, long-term planning down the road to pull up kind of in the moment's notice to say, how is the ventilation, at Wheelock? What do we need to do? What's the timeline on those replacements? Usually about now, someone says, like, so what do we need to do?
And that's a easy and a hard question all in one. So just some context on this. Everybody knows an engineer, I'm sure. Everybody loves an engineer. But this data is driven by architects and engineers, and it's very, factual and black and white in some ways, which doesn't necessarily translate to the real world all the time. But kind of an example of that is roofs have an expected warranty date. Typically roofs that are, a current vintage had a 20-year warranty. So something that was installed in 2000 would have a warranty expiration of 2020. That does not mean that the roof magically disappears and you no longer have a roof in 2020, but it does mean that your warranty disappears. And so that's something that when an architect looks at that, they say, okay, the roof is expiring in 2020, it needs to be replaced, right? That's kind of the way that the state asks us to view those. But the reality of that is that the roof will certainly continue to work for a couple days after that, and maybe a couple years. So there's some context that you have to put to the information and utilize for it from a planning perspective. So you can see just a kind of a very quick summary of some things to consider from a health, safety, welfare, and kind of warm, safe, and dry perspective at each of the buildings that the district has on the screen. So one of those is roofs. We looked at the records together tonight, so there's a series of things to consider with the roofs in the 10-year plan as you're looking out. Windows is another thing. Windows is a perfect example. Windows have, a 20-year-ish useful life. Your windows are around that, but windows can last 60 years. I mean, they really don't turn into a pumpkin at 20 years. So that's really an item to discuss. If you're not experiencing issues and there's no air gaps and nobody's complaining and there's no issues, that could very much so sit, for another 10 years with no work and really not be an issue at all. Electrical distribution, there's some things to think about at this campus for that, as well as exterior doors. At Wheelock, there's some more roofs to consider, some phones, mechanical improvements, as well as parking lots and sidewalks. And then at the maintenance garage, there's kind of just a handful of small items to consider there that are kind of from that health, safety, welfare, warm, safe, and dry, very top of the pile things to consider as a group. Now there's hundreds of other entries to consider too, but just a very high level summary of what's there. But that all, like Brad said, it feels like you're kind of at the end of something when you get a building condition survey, but it's really where the work begins. So long-term planning is really the next step to this. And that's the secret to the success. So if we think about the blue list as the list that, the honey-do list, your house needs those things, all right, we got to get a roof, we've got to replace the floor in the kitchen. But then there's all the things that you want to do. And those two things, when you marry those two lists, is really where you start to get successful long-term planning. So the orange list is things that really we need to start to talk about, the future of Fredonia. So somebody brought up playgrounds tonight, right? That's something that we want to do. Improved student experiences. Are there things that would improve student experiences, right? Building condition survey can't dream your dreams for you. So what can fill in that category? Renovated spaces. Are there athletic improvements, playground improvements, other ideas that need to be considered for that? And Brad kind of started to outline a process for that. But really, that's where the balance of this comes in. There's always things that you should be doing for your buildings, but what are the fun things that we also want to do for our buildings and for our community and to continue the great place that Fredonia is? So once we get that list, and that's tough, but once you get that list together, then there's some work to prioritize that, right? We have to look at it all and weigh all of those pieces and parts. Typically, we recommend looking out 10 years when you do that. So that's kind of a good gauge. Something that feels like quite an accomplishment when you look at 10 years is capital outlays. So those little $100,000 projects become $1 million of things off the list by the time that you're done with 10 of those. So when you look out a decade, you're kind of really starting to take some of those things off the list. Other things is there are always grants kind of coming on and off the table. I can't project what those look like for 10 years, but kind of having a couple of items flagged for these are things we'd like to do that are at the top of the pile are pretty valuable. Some of the ones that are available right now are SAFE Act. I'm sure there will be other grants though across the next decade that I can't imagine. 3 years ago I couldn't imagine half of the alphabet soup that we've had in the last handful of years. So. And then there's always maintenance projects, kind of smaller things that can come off the prioritized list that can get accomplished that way too. And then of course there are capital projects. And capital projects are a real partnership between everybody at this table, the state ed department, your financial planner. There's a lot of people that help make those possible. But capital projects can be timed with debt falling off, so that's something that can help neutralize the tax impact on taxpayers. Is if you're kind of coming along and you have a small amount of debt falling off, you can kind of right-size a project to align with that and have a lower impacts on taxpayers. And then again, if maybe 7 years down the road there's a larger piece of debt coming off, again you could right-size a project to align with that as well. So that all comes, that's kind of the big picture, the end goal. Sean, I do have a sample of a Casadega one on my pile there if you wanted to pass it around to the board. This is kind of like a cheat sheet to say like, hey, in 5 years you guys could be looking at something like this. Just to show you that it's worth the effort. So this is a client just up Route 60 here that we've been working with for the last 5 years, and it just kind of shows like what it looks like when you get it rolling. You can skim the list, you know, don't tell them that I'm sharing all their secrets, but you can kind of see what it looks like. Everything that's grayed out has been completed, and the second page is everything that's projected to occur in the next 5 years. So some value of doing a long-term plan is also that you have a little bit of like a pat on the shoulder of what you've accomplished in the last 5 years when you look back as well. So when you are thinking about long-term planning, and I will admit, I am not a financial planner, and your financial advisor couldn't be here tonight, so she prepped me with a lot of slides. I'm gonna do my very best, and the guy in the blue shirt over there is gonna help me if I screw up. So, long-term plan, 2 questions that usually get asked. How much can we spend, and how much will the state aid us on? 2 very good questions. So we'll start with how much can we spend. And that can come down to 2 things. So we talked a little bit about debt falling off. And so if you have debt falling off, that's really helpful because it has no impact on your taxpayers and you can kind of right-size a project there. But the other way to accomplish that is capital reserves. I like to think of them as savings accounts for capital projects. They can basically only be spent on capital project work, but they offset that local taxpayer burden by kind of some foresight and planning. So right now, you guys already have $300,000 in a capital reserve, which will allow for there to be a no tax impact project of $5 million. She also shared with us that for every $100,000 that the district could add to that savings account, there would be a benefit of $425,000 in capital project work. And I'll kind of explain the why to that in about 2 seconds here. But that's kind of what the existing project looks like. If you wanted to increase the size of that project, you certainly can. And that is basically you would look at creating a tax impact. So this is, let's see, the tiny text to the right of the tax impact says annual impact on tax rate per $100,000 AV equalized. My layman's understanding of that is basically that's an equalized rate for all of the different towns and areas that your taxes affect. So it is not exactly what one person's taxes will look like, but it is kind of equalized. So per $100,000 household, if you added $1 million, $5 million, or $10 million to that original $5 million that you already have saved for, it would have a $2, $11, or $22 tax impact per $100,000 a house. I'm doing all right so far, John? Okay. So let's see, how much will the state aid us on is the next question. So think of this like a dollar. 82.7% is coming from the state. So basically every dollar you spend, 83 cents is coming from them. 17 cents is coming from Fredonia. So when we explain that if you put another $100,000 in that piggy bank, it would actually generate like $450,000. That's because of this ratio. Because the state basically takes every 17 cents you give them and turns it into a dollar effectively for purchasing construction work. So, layers of fun here, guys, stick with me. 5 year, there's also something called a maximum cost allowance. This is that every 5 years, you get a certain amount of money that you can spend on any building. You have to look backwards basically for a 5-year window at any time. So from today, we're looking back 5 years to say how much work have we already done on this building. We have to subtract that from the allowance that we have at that campus. In this case, it's a very small amount. You have a couple of capital outlays. There's not a major impact there. So you more or less have the complete maximum cost allowance available at both of your buildings. And at the main campus, that's $63 million, and at Wheelock, that is $16 million. I said there were layers of fun, so stick with me for the next layer. Within that $63 million, there are 2 buckets of funding and 2 ways that that money can be spent. So it's not just like a blank check for $63 million. It's that you have to think about one portion of it being for construction and then another portion of it being for site and incidentals. So the main distinction here is that when you work inside the building, you're working from the pot on the left. And when you work outside the building or with people like us, architects, or engineers, or surveyors, or attorneys, or financial advisors, that's coming out of the green bucket. So at each of your buildings, those ratios are broken out like this. So of the $63 million available at the main campus, $51 million can be spent on the building, and then $12 million can be spent on the site or on all of the people that help you get the project done. And then at Wheelock, the ratio there is $13 million and $3 million. So this is all just setting kind of like the massive framework that we have to work within when we're thinking about long-term planning.
but a couple of key things to think about. So this is the cheat sheet. Like if you're thinking, let me keep one slide from this for all of the work we have to do in the coming year. This is it, because it kind of summarizes everything. Your MCA, your maximum cost allowance at each campus, your building aid from New York State. If you added added like dollars to the project cost, what that would be on the bottom right, and then what your capital reserve already buys you on the bottom left. So that all gets us to the next steps. Plenty of work to do from here. So like we talked about, one of the starting points is discussing and prioritizing the work that already was found in the building condition survey, adding into it the want to do's. So building those two lists together and then starting to prioritize them, keeping all the partners on board, like we said, financial advisor, the state, and then kind of in the short term here, scheduling a board workshop to start to go through some of that as a team. And that brings me to the end of the slides. But I love questions.
Everybody understand why we brought Alyssa with us tonight?
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's nice to finally get to this stage. I have several questions, I'm sure everybody else does, but I'll start off with, I saw that you had like 7 million, maybe 6 million in roof, and I understand the warranty bit, but will we get a detailed analysis of the roofs and what they actually are, what their condition actually is?
Yeah, so for roofs, this is a good example one. So we do a visual inspection as part of our general thing here. We look at everything with our visual eyes, right? Visual eyes can only get you so far. So on a roof specifically, if you said, hey, Alyssa, we really want to think about doing our roofs in the next like 3 or 4 years as part of a capital project. It's not going to be on the 10-year end of the long-term plan, it's going to be on the 3-year end. We would want to talk next steps on how to clarify like exactly what that work is associated to that item. So for example, we might do scans to see if you have wet insulation anywhere, if that could be salvaged, how full depth your placement needs to be. So we can kind of start to hone in. Usually the next steps are we start to outline, okay, these ones might be in a closer capital project, those ones might be in a farther capital project. What's the homework we need to do on these 10 items that are kind of sticking up towards the top of the list to start to really understand the scope that's associated with doing those.
And associated with that would also be where you plan on doing those roofs, right? Inflation changes,
Yep.
escalation every year, and the cost of roofing materials and things. So understanding where you feel it fits into your long-term plan will help us plan for that particular size and cost.
Okay, good.
So, kind of follow up, Steve, I was kind of on the same place. You had a very nice field on every page that said plus or minus 3 years, plus or minus 5 years. So
Yeah.
that's based on the warranty and the visual inspection, so that gives up, so what if the warranty is 5 years away? Do we know that the visual inspection is saying that actually we need to do that sooner? Like, is it really the warranty that's dictating that plus or minus?
We leave it in the hands of the architect or engineer that evaluated the system to come up with the answer. So there's a prescribed construct of what goes into 1, 3. So the brackets are kind of 1, 3, 5, 7, 10, and 15 years. From the state, those are the options that we're given to choose from. And that's kind of why you see so many different blue shirts, because each person is an expert in that specific category. So the way that someone evaluates unit ventilators or boilers is a little bit different than the way you evaluate a roof. A roof is kind of easy because there's a clear warranty date. Pretty much every other item in your building does not have a clear warranty date. So that warranty item comes into play at the roof, but does not come into play necessarily at a unit ventilator, where the expected remaining useful life is more of the indicator there. So it's not a one-size-fits-all answer, but it's definitely a judgment call, and with the parameters that the state provides in mind. So really, the usual next step to this process is like, hey, here's everything the architects and the engineers said. Let's process that through our Fredonia brains, because they might have told us we need to do the boilers. This is a really common one. Boilers can last 3 or 4 times their recommended useful life if you have someone that knows how to take care of them. Some older models are very simple in parts, and as long as you're replacing them and you have someone who can maintain them, it's really not problematic. So we've definitely had clients where, people we're working with, they'll come to us and say, hey, don't worry about the boiler on that list. We've got the guy. He can maintain this. This is a 20-year problem away for us, even though we're flagging it. It's already 30 years old. But there's confidence kind of from the district end. So it's definitely a partnership of evaluating the data and utilizing it as a planning tool moving forward.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it seems like every 5 years you can do a major project, is that accurate?
Ooh, no clear rule of thumb here. Definitely not a one-size-fits-all answer, but the state having 5-year building condition surveys certainly puts most districts on a 5-year schedule by cause and effect. So like since the state asks every district to do a building condition survey every 5 years, it usually has an effect that says, oh, let's look at that information and process how to use it to build, plan for a project. Does that mean it's exactly 5 years for every client? Not even close. And there's definitely not like a specific rule of thumb, but I think, and this is why we recommend looking out 10 years, because you really do want to think about it in the context of a couple of factors. That maximum cost allowance that we talked about resets on a 5-year basis too, so there's a lot of things that kind of fall into this 5-year repetition process from the state's funding side, but also in thinking about the work that you need to get done on the timeline that you want can certainly drive projects to be on a shorter and or longer timetable from that too.
They have certainly set it up as a recommendation. The state has set up those 5-year windows, expecting that within every 5 years, if you're doing something, you'll be able to keep up with, the maintenance of your buildings, but also the changes in technology and advancements that you may want to pursue. So.
And when I looked, at first when I looked at the slides, I was like, oh, the roof thing is an emergency, but with a closer look, one of the biggest cost ones said it still had a useful life of 7 years, so that's no emergency.
Yeah, and that's really where it comes into interpreting it and working through the information as a group, because you're right, you could look at any single entry on this and be like, oh, all right, that's it. But it's definitely more of a conversation, not necessarily like a cut cold fact when we have to summarize it with the information that's available, but the real value of this data comes into the interpretation and prioritization with your team. And that's really the turning point we're on right now.
I guess the other question I just have is with the technology stuff, you were saying how you can't imagine things for us. So I didn't see a lot about what you recommend for technology. I guess that's why.
So that comes into these next steps in surveying the district, surveying the people that'll be a part of that to understand, what those needs are. And I think Alyssa kind of mentioned it in there before. We can't, the building condition survey is created to analyze all of your existing conditions, everything you currently have. It can't help you imagine what you want for your school district. So we incorporate, the what you have with the what you want into a plan, and then we can help you lay out that into that 10-year plan and determine how you can get it.
But the architects in the room love to help you imagine. It's just the building condition survey that can. Yes.
Can I talk about what the state is allowing us, the $62 million?
Yeah.
I left my glasses in the car.
That's okay, I know how to click back. There we go.
It's 63, Steve.
63, and then, well, anyway, the construction and the incidentals.
Yep.
I guess my question, I don't have to read this, is, oh, there you go. Not saying we're gonna do this, but can it be, because we have 2 buildings, is there wiggle room to slide that either direction?
I love the question. So the short answer is no. The long answer is if you have a really good idea, we should definitely ask the question. There are real people at the table at SCD, and if you have a really good idea, there's certainly something to be said about asking it. But in general, the broad answer to this question is no. The very nuanced answer is maybe.
And some of those maybes have come to fruition for
Yep.
us, let's put it that way. Having a good argument, having a couple of conversations with them so that you can, debate your case, will in some cases give us the leverage that we need in order to get a project done.
So if you have a really good idea, and I've sat in board meetings where there have been really good ideas, definitely write it down so we don't lose track.
I don't have any good
All
ideas.
right.
Just asking the question.
All right.
I've got a good idea.
So if I could piggyback on his question, and it's this slide, there's the building, the construction, and then there's the incidentals. Can you go through that a little bit? Because, there's a lot of people who are looking at doing something with our athletic facilities.
Yeah.
And the way it was explained to me very briefly is that 12 million gets eaten up very quickly on other incidentals that really limit you in what you could do for a major athletic facility project?
That's a very good summary, and I'll dive a little deep, and I might lose a couple people, but try to stick with me. So the general premise is that yes, all of your stuff inside the building, and I'm gonna round these numbers to like 50 and 10 just for storytelling purposes. 50 and 10 if we kind of think 50 inside the building and 10 for outside or incidentals. If you do a project at the building and say it's a $10 million project inside the building, all aidable work, things like that, just a general rule of thumb is that 20% of that will go towards incidentals. Might be a little less, might be a little more, but like rule of thumb, big numbers. So you can say that $2 million of that would go towards incidentals, which would need to come out of the other side of that. So if you do 10 million, 8 is actually gonna go construction and 2 is gonna go incidentals. And then, so for example, if you wanted to do another thing outside the building, also for 10 million, you could do that, right? You could do that, but again, the same thing would happen. 8 would go towards construction outside the building, and 2 would go towards incidentals. So you could do at the main campus a $20 million project where 4 million would be for incidentals, and then 8 would be outside and 8 would be inside. And that would utilize your entire incidental allowance at the main campus.
Okay.
Did that track? That's a lot of words with no description.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Is there a way to sort all of the information by other topics like safety, health?
Yes.
Like you put the ventilation, is that because the air quality is poor, stuff like that?
Yeah, so basically, yes. The short answer is yes, you can sort this, and that's like the best part of it. I can't do anything interactive on the screen here tonight because it's a presentation, but yes, it's a database, it's super active. Basically, every fun thing, if you love Excel, everything you can do in Excel is even more fun in the database, and you can sort it, filter it, and like basically whittle it down to like, okay, these are the, handful of items that we should be considering for, ventilation at this building, or health, safety, welfare is exactly a setting. There's things that the state deems health, safety, welfare items. You can filter the entire database by turning off all of the ones that are not health, safety, welfare items.
A question, and maybe this is putting the cart before the horse, but I know the athletic facilities are something that a lot of people are interested in.
Yeah.
If, obviously, there's hurdles that we as a district have to cross, or jump, I should say, but once we get there, if we decide that we can, after taking care of everything that needs to be taken care of, if we decide that we can move forward with an athletic facility,
Yeah.
what's a realistic timeline?
Good question. So I always like to say that for timeline for getting to what? Actually, let me qualify that.
I guess what's a realistic timeline for everything? Obviously,
Okay.
architects need time to design, there needs to be a
Like
bid,
this
there needs
guy.
to be construction. And then,
Yeah. So-
at what point does this become usable?
I'll give a timeline from kind of like from today forward, like a theoretical timeline. So today we'll call it Christmas, end of the year of 2023. I would say that basically 6 to 9 months from now, you should expect to have an operational long-term plan as long as you guys are committed to input on that. So like if you don't talk to us for the next 6 months, then it might make that difficult, but as long as we're kind of committed to meeting once a month across the next 6 to 9 months, you can hone in on that pretty thoroughly in that time period. And then from there, it's kind of what does the plan tell us about when to complete capital project work. So for example, if you were looking at a project going to vote at the end of the year next year, that would be plausible because you kind of have spent 6 or 9 months laying out a plan, and then you could go out to your voters and see if that's something that they were interested in complying with it, working with you on as well. So, and then from construction, from there, I always say from the moment you have an idea, you should think about it like a high schooler's time on campus is from when you can actually implement something. It can be a little less than that, but like a 3-year rule of thumb from like this moment, inception moment, to execution is kind of a general rule of thumb because, like you said, architects take some time, the state takes even more time, and then you're allowed to do what you wanted to do in the first place. So that process typically from like inception to seeing like a shovel in the ground is kind of just a loose schedule, is about 3 years.
I'm kind of confused about this, the building inside versus the incidentals. So if we're talking about an athletic field, are you saying we can only use the right side money on that? And
That's
not-
correct. Yeah.
Okay. And so how would we know in terms of trying to make a decision about what we want to do when we're imagining something and we're not able to use a number you give us because it's not replacing in kind? How would we know what total cost we're talking about?
Yeah, so that's a perfect question, because so the building condition survey is the only thing that can't imagine for you. That's why I said architects love to imagine. We can absolutely work with you. So if you're imagining a facility in your head that has a certain number of things, this and that, and I think it has these number of seats and all of those things, that's exactly what we're here for, to help you see what that could look like and understand the price tag associated with it. But that's just kind of that next step of like, all right, here's what the building service told us we need to do or should do and consider about our facilities. Here are the things that we want to do. We'll take that list, put numbers to everything, images where necessary, help you look at renderings, ideas, like layouts. And that's kind of that 6 to 9 month process of starting to look at these items.
So would it make sense within that process to have you do possibly 3 different alternatives?
Yeah, 3, 10, however many.
Because, we're looking at this going, do we want the Cadillac, do we want, a good, or can we not afford any of that, we've got to,
Yeah.
get a Volkswagen, right? Maybe that's wrong, but we wouldn't know unless we had numbers on this, and we wouldn't know how to decide, we wouldn't know what to present to our voters.
Yeah, that's a very common approach to it, is, let's start with, what does it cost to say, take what we have and just make it better? And then what does it cost to go to this level, and then what does it cost to go to this level? Because ultimately, it's about what you feel comfortable putting in front of your community and what you think your community wants, okay? Because essentially, it becomes a partnership between you and them to decide, are we willing to go beyond that tax neutral number that's there? Are we willing to, to invest a few dollars of our own in order to get those types of facilities? So we can certainly help you lay out what those options look like. It's a part of that designing, that imagining sort of phase, where you start to decide what the things are that you would like to see included in something like that, so that you can create that almost an a la carte menu of, we can get this, we can get better, we can get best, that type of scenario.
So in that process, have you ever experienced where the school board, the administration would go to the voters at this stage and say, what would be your appetite? And say, if we improved what we had, and it, pick a number, and just a very soft number, would you be in favor of that? Do you want to move the Orange Bowl? Do you want to have everything all in one spot? Do you want artificial turf? Have you seen where they put out a survey to voters, rather than having a committee decide that isn't a representative sample of the district? Because we don't know what the representative sample of the district is yet, and what their appetite for this is. We
Yes.
really don't.
The short answer is yes. We've definitely seen that be an effective means of gathering information. And like that can be coupled with talking to people in specific departments or talking to different groups of people, students, small, yes. But the short answer is yes. Surveys can be very effective for gathering information from people that aren't all in the room.
So what is your experience with that survey? Who prepares that survey?
Well, there's a number of different ways you can do it,
Okay.
okay? And I guess what I would say is that we can talk about what those options are. We can certainly put you in touch. We have a vote coming up in just a few days that had very similar circumstances.
Okay.
They used a couple of different methods, so they wanted to make sure that it wasn't just a hard, fast, this type of survey. They used a number of different survey options that gave them a really good perspective, and from that, they're feeling pretty confident that they're going to have a successful vote that accommodates what they need and what the community wants based on the information that they gathered. So as a part of this process, we'll be happy to share that process with you and put you in touch with some of those people, because
Great.
There are other boards of education just like yourself. There are other administrators and superintendents, and they have a great insight on how this has worked for them.
So the list that is the summary with for instance, so you say you can only put on here what is replacing in kind, so when you put like the baseball field and those prices, like 3 million and 4 for the softball, that's, do we assume that's replacing it with, so not turf, you're just saying in-kind grass, okay. So there's no way to really translate that to a brand new,
No, but if that's like, so for example, as we move into kind of the workshop and planning mode, if that's something that you guys say, hey, this is the top, here's a list of items we'd like a menu for, that's exactly what we're here to do.
okay, so those are just literally replacing as is, playgrounds, whatever's on here, okay.
You got it.
There's nothing taken into account of what the current standard is or what the expectation is, so I mean,
Yeah.
right, so we did these fields however long ago, replacing them the way they existed 10 or 15 years ago is not to today's standard, so do these numbers account for?
They do. Yeah, and in particular, so that's a small thing, right, is that there's different things in sports that are related, but also building code items or energy code, things like that, those are also accommodated for. So we're not putting back in a 1920 generation boiler, we're putting in a current boiler with all of the kind of modifications that are necessary right now to comply with codes.
This is very specific, and I don't know if you have the answer for it, but back when we started this process, we talked about wanting engineers to conduct some soil sampling to see what was going on with our fields, and I'm wondering if that was done.
I'm gonna look to Brad and ask if that, you mentioned maybe that had,
Yeah, so I think what we were talking about is that we put, I think, John, about $300,000 in drainage in our fields out back, and they didn't seem to be draining in the way that we anticipated. So we brought in someone from the county to analyze that and look at that. And one of the things that we found out from that is that we have what they call Canandaigua soil, which is notorious for not being a very well-draining soil. So although the work that was done, the person who came in to do that supported and said this is the right kind of work, and it seems to be operating correctly. It doesn't seem like there's clogs in the system, and there's definitely water flowing, but the soil is just such that it is always going to be a tough go to remove that much water when you're looking across that field and thinking about the amount of water that falls, and then how quickly does that get through the soil to the drainage, then out. So really that was the determination that it wasn't so much that the work that was done was not correct or the right work. Now, there was some other ramifications of that work with some uneven playing fields and some ruts and things like that, but just in terms of the drainage itself, it seemed like that was a reasonable thing to do. It just didn't produce what we were hoping it would. So that's what we know.
Would we be talking about possibly relocating our fields, or what is the solution to that problem? Like, would we want to build fields in a place where we know there's a soil drainage problem?
and that's a real puzzle piece solution, right? That starts to have some waterfall effects, and that's kind of one of those things that we would definitely, I can tell that this is a piece that we will work on together with over the course of the next 9 months to look at what are our options, what do they cost, what can we do if we move this puzzle piece here or there. So there will be a lot of ideas and options that we'll look at, I can tell already, just from these questions. These are great questions. These are all very long-term planning, forward-focused, 10-year plan in mind questions of saying what's the right thing to do for our district across the next decade.
Well, listen, I was hoping you, and I don't want to take us too far down a road here, but Mr. Schrantz, who's here, brought us a drawing of the Grand Island facility.
Oh, yeah.
Coach Beers played a game in Grand Island last year, and that got a lot of attention. And that is a multi-use facility that I know you're aware of.
Yep.
A dual soccer and football field with a softball and baseball field where softball and baseball could be played at the same time with
Yep.
mobile fences. Just as a ballpark at this point in time, would you be able to just say, hey, we're not going to hold you to it, just where might a project like that fall?
Yeah, you can hold me to it if you do it in the next 3 years. If you do it a decade from now, you can't hold me to it so much. So yes, that we were the architect on that project. It was completed, I believe, in 2019. So it's a couple years ago. But if you kind of projected those costs forwards and said, what does a multi-use turf field cost that accommodates for a handful of sports and kind of has a factor for, like you said, soils,
dirt isn't dirt everywhere, you know, most people put a shovel in the ground, but it's just not all the same, so what work you need to do to actually get that turf field in place is kind of the range on this, but it's kind of a $10 to $13 million range that you're in to get something like that going on, and then it really just, that flex just comes down to what are all the little pieces and parts that need to move to make that possible, and what's the dirt, and all of those things.
And is it also accurate or not, someone brought this up to me over break, that like concession stands and other things that would be attached to that are not aidable?
Concession stands are not aidable. So, and something to know about the numbers on the screen here, that maximum cost allowance, it is only for aidable work, is that maximum cost allowance. And then, so basically if you built a concession stand today, that would fall entirely kind of outside of the realm of aid. So that dollar that we had, where 17 cents was coming from you guys and 83 cents coming from the state, that goes out the window, and the whole dollar comes from you guys. Kind of comes down to the schools. So yeah, there's something that they've published called the Building Aid Guidelines, and they basically say what's aidable and what's not aidable, and concession stands are not aidable.
You can't even get a hot dog.
13 million.
That's a lot of them.
And I'm just sharing this. If anybody knows this, like I said, there's always good questions to ask the state. And some of them result in change. But as of right now, this is one of their more archaic documents, Building Aid Guidelines, that it does currently state that right now.
Are there ways to take advantage of putting classroom space in an athletic facility like that?
Thinkers are good.
Yeah.
Yes.
We've attempted that, and many, some school districts have, say, culinary programs that they've tried to incorporate into that. Some of them have put their business programs into that. We haven't been successful with anything. Some of them put their broadcasting programs up into the press box and tried to turn that. We haven't had success with it, although the argument is there. I would say that the greatest success we've seen with concessions facilities is by somehow attaching them to the building. If you attach them to your education to building, depending on where you put your athletic fields, we've seen school districts that have converted a classroom and bathrooms that have access to the outside into really, really nice concessions facilities, and we're able to, capture some aid on that.
Two things. Otherwise, have you seen where communities form like a fundraising committee to raise funds rather than raise taxes for some of those non-aidable costs?
It's difficult to execute, but not impossible. We've had 2 school districts that have ventured on this. One really struggled to hit the mark that they thought that they would. The goal was, I think, more reasonable from out of the gate, and they basically sold bricks on a sidewalk to kind of buy like one piece of equipment. There we go. So it's difficult, but not impossible, and it's just something we're missing that financial advisor. I would definitely want to defer to them to kind of say like how that could be incorporated and things like that, but yes, we've seen it done. This kind of like making sure it's a reasonable expectation is the most important part.
And there are certain rules about when that money is available, how it's transferred to the school district, those kind of things that go into play before you can use it that way, so.
Thanks. The one other thing, and then I'll not say another word, and that is when we were talking about the surveying the community, I need to dig through my NISBA materials, but different people were talking about a tool that sounds like it's expensive but incredible for surveying the community.
I think it's called Thought Exchange.
Yes.
Yes, and that is one of the tools that I was going to recommend. It has a great ability to survey a great number of people, and we've seen it used very effectively for projects like this. But the cost part of it, I've only seen the results side of it, and they've been pretty good.
Thanks.
I want to ask a question that I think a lot of people want to hear the answer to, because when you put it like that, it sounds very difficult to get this done. We look around and most schools around us have done it, so can we do it? Are we, I think that people look around and think, well, why can everybody else do it and not us? Then you hear this and you think, oh, this is pretty tough, so.
Yeah, it's honestly just all about, you guys are doing the most important step right now, which is acknowledging it's a desire and look out 10 years and put a plan to it. That's really, and you have the right information in the room to utilize to build the plan. So is it possible? Yes, you can look around and see them. Does every district make it work? No.
No, we've certainly sat around tables where the board looks at it and everybody looks at it and says, this just doesn't make sense for us. We'd love to do it, but it really just doesn't make sense. We've sat at other tables where they work really hard to make it make sense because it's that important to the community. So yeah, it can go both ways here. There's no wrong answer at all. I think it's just most important you guys ask for every option that you want to consider, understand the ramifications of it from a cost standpoint and that value that it adds to your community, and make a decision that feels right for you guys.
And Alyssa hit the nail on the head when she talked about the fact that this is a long-term plan, right? It's a 10-year plan. We have worked with a number of districts who've been in your situation where it's a big financial lift. It's also possibly a change, you know, whether or not it is a facility that stays where it is now or moves to somewhere else. A lot of big decisions that need to be made, and they have done it in portions. So that 5-year maximum cost allowance that Alyssa mentioned is going to come back in 5 years. So you can plan your facilities around getting, you know, the most important portions of that work done within 5 years, and then planning the other things in the next 5 years. And we've actually seen some districts in this area use that approach in order to get to the complexes and the goals that they're trying to achieve.
It can also give you the time to think from a capital reserve side of things what you want to build into that over time, so that 7 years from now you can do something that accommodates that with less of a tax impact too.
So can I ask about the tax impact slide where you give 1, 5, and 10 million in one cost of the taxpayer?
Yes.
Is that a, you know, say take the 10 million, if we were to, you know, ask for 10 million or try to have 10 extra million and it's going to cost $22 to the 100,000, is that a forever tax increase or is there a sunset on that, or?
I'm going to look to John, not my area of expertise.
The guy in the blue shirt. What's that?
At the end of the debt,
So at the end of the debt, it would
which
go
is
away.
typically what, John, 15 years? Is that 15, 18?
Because my assumption was it was a
Right, the key is,
forever increase.
as Alyssa put on there, that's based on an average, so per town, it will be different distribution.
Right,
Yeah,
but it's for the debt, the length of the debt, okay. Thank you, John.
If I could just ask on that, is it typical though that once you get into a debt cycle, that at the end of that, you try to maintain an equal, a new debt that's similar to that moving forward? So like, there would probably be a carry on of that really forever.
That's the optimum. When you have 3 current debt projects, one is coming off in 29, one's coming off in 31, and one's coming off in 35. And so those would be that amount of money in the budget process you'd be looking at, trying to hit those dates if you could to do just that.
So it really would end up being forever, even though that it expires at the end of the debt cycle. The idea is that you probably start a next project that would then carry that forward.
What you're looking for is to not have a 3 or 4 year period where you have no debt at all and have to put in some huge amount. So you're just trying to maintain it.
Yeah.
And then is that tax increase on the assessed values?
Yes. Any other questions?
I guess just for
Well,
John.
I thought you were done.
Well, it's not for them, I think that's what I was promising. But I'm curious about our debt that we do have falling off. Like, what do we have available to us?
Well, you don't have anything falling off right now until 29, so.
That's sad.
That's actually the smallest of the 3.
But it is something to, when you're looking out at the 10 years, that is one of the baselines that we'll use as a group to say where you have debt falling off and what right-sized aligns with that.
Right, because you have the 29 and the 31, so that'd be right in your next 5 coming off of this.
Anything else?
So for people who are here tonight, just want to go back to those next steps for a minute. So we're looking at setting, it'd be nice if we could set a date tonight for a board workshop to kind of grapple with this before the holiday break. That I would think shortly after the holiday break, we would have the first of a forum in which it would be your time to step up to a mic or to an area and share whatever it is that you think is important or whatever it is you would want want to share with us, or whatever your thoughts are, ideas are from the community. I think we would probably start with that, and then utilize some type of survey once we got some initial feel of some areas, concerns, focus areas, and build those into whatever that survey might look like. And then I think that would then be part of kind of, I don't know how many forums we'll actually do or surveys we would do, but kind of, you know, between the board processing information, forum, survey, board processing information, forum, survey. So I just don't want anyone here tonight to say, like, I thought I'd have a chance to say whatever I wanted, or I thought it'd be more of an open dialogue tonight. That's coming, and I don't want you to feel like, again, like I mentioned before, we've been trying to listen throughout this process. We are listening, and we will continue to listen as we work our way through this.
Dr. Z, just to be clear, that board workshop, although it's not interactive, it is open to the public, correct?
Typically, I think the suggestion was that
Typically a workshop, the public forum would be the public portion, and then the workshop would kind of be just board members typically.
I had another question. Have the building administrators, teachers, have they already had or a chance to look at this, or an opportunity to say what they would like to see, or that will come, or how long?
So initially, people gave us feedback that we relayed to Young and Wright prior to the blue shirts coming out. So they had their typical things, but there were also other things on the list about the music suites, about the athletic fields. There was a lot of things in terms of technology, air conditioning. You know, there's a lot of input that we got. So in terms of anybody seeing any of this prior to tonight, we haven't, but certainly, at least with our administrators, we'll get that information out and begin disseminating that information. So what we kind of looked at tonight is the official kickoff altogether before anything went out.
You mentioned this, that you spoke with the staff and the people in the buildings.
Yeah.
Is that captured anywhere?
It is, yes. We're a big fan on like meeting minutes and keeping records. Yes, we have what we call our existing building concerns. So everything that we documented kind of categorically by area of work. So yes, we have a very thorough existing concerns list that we can use as a jumping off point with you guys as well.
Okay. We're good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
We'll be back and see you soon.
Yes, it is. It's a kickoff,
Yes.
really, of getting started with long-term plans and where to go from here. But thank you very much.
Looking forward to it.
Thank you for having us tonight and all the great questions.
Great.
Yeah. We understand you guys have a bit to travel, so we're not offended if you head out or anybody else heads out who came just for this portion of the meeting, so.
So we have a budget amendment resolution as detailed here in the agenda. If I could get a motion to bring that to the floor, please.
So moved.
Ms. Powell Fortner, and a second.
Second.
I was just making sure.
Okay.
He was good. Yeah.
Ms. Gold, that was you? Okay. I understand this, but I would rather that Mr. Ziliaks or Mr. Forbes kind of go through this with some expertise.
Yeah, so I'm just going to say, and I'll turn it over to Mr. Forbes, this is the resolution that came up our pretty lengthy discussion at the board, our last board meeting, understanding some of the dynamics around special education that resulted in this scenario. So this is really just the resolution that kind of wraps that up, and then we can finalize our audit, And then I'm still hopeful at our next meeting, we can have our audit report.
Great, so as we discussed last time, basically due to primarily unexpected special education and transportation costs, we were over budget. The board has the ability to increase the budget for contingent expenses, which these are, simply by making a motion to authorize it. We reviewed this with council. Hodgson and Ross provided the resolution for us after discussion on the information. We're in a good spot. If there is such a thing out of this, we're in a good spot in that it didn't affect the revenue stream. We still have the cash flow, so we didn't have to get into any kind of short-term borrowings and things like that, which is a whole other layer of issue. So this basically is just to get on the books that amount budgeted, so it offsets the negatives in the 22-23 school year.
Okay. Any questions from the board? No? Okay. If not, then all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. Next, we have the discussion on a subject we briefly touched on last meeting, and that is the prospect of we actually have a social worker, or have that position budgeted for, but we're looking to see where we stand on filling that and expanding.
Yeah, so again, if you've been following our board meetings, this is kind of a new category for us, where it's just a discussion item about a particular thing that came up forward. Mr. Paschke had mentioned this at our last board meeting, at the budget building process for last year. We wanted to include a .6 social worker at the high school that would give the high school a social worker 5 days a week, which was the intent, and seemed like a reasonable plan. As we advertised for a .6 and even reached out to some local agencies to find a quality candidate to take that position, we began to struggle to fill it. At one point, through one of the agencies, we thought we could fill the position with a 1.0 for the same cost, because through them, there were some grants involved and some money that would come back to us. And at one point, we actually had somebody who had accepted the position. We were getting ready for a board resolution, and then they decided not to take the position and stay where they were in that moment. So this has been a struggle trying to get a .6. The suggestion came up of, should we make it a 1.0 position and potentially have more luck getting a full-time person on board as opposed to the .6. Now, probably in the grand scheme of things, we're talking about, I don't know, anywhere from maybe $10,000 to $25,000 difference, which in our entire budget is not a big deal. However, we tend not to try to look at things in isolation and look at the bigger picture. Currently, as you know, we have access to ARP funding, and the purpose of ARP funding was to address things that happened during the pandemic, whether they were academic, social, emotional, mental health. And part of what we did with that money was bring in people to help and assist in those areas. So currently in the ARP funding, we have 7 positions that are currently part of our faculty and staff, who are doing a fantastic job and doing the jobs that we thought would be helpful to counteract the impact of the pandemic. However, this money falls off at the end of this school year and will no longer be available, which puts us in the position of how will we maintain those positions and move forward with these benefits still in place. This year we also hired a special education teacher at the elementary school and an ENL teacher between Willock and the elementary school due to increased needs. So we sort of have those positions in the next 2 that weren't fully anticipated, which all of a sudden makes adding just what seems to be a small amount of money to make a 1.0 social worker perhaps more viable, a little bit more of a concern. So the catch would be if we decided to create the 1.0 position, hired somebody, let's just say prior to break, it's possible 6 months from now, we might not be able to maintain that as a full-time position. And we talked about it as an admin team, just the complications of that and potentially the mixed message of that. So this is just a good example of how something that seems in isolation, like you're telling me we can't come up with $10, $15, maybe $20,000 to make this happen. We probably could, but there's the bigger picture to consider. So at this point, I would recommend that we hold. We continue to advertise the 0.6. If it's possible that the agency we were working with initially could get us a 1.0 for a similar price, certainly that would be viable. But I'm really just thinking about those ARP positions and what that is going to mean to us as we begin to build the budget for next year. That's just my opinion. I understand there's counter arguments to what I'm sharing here tonight, and that's just from me as the person that's trying to keep an eye on the big picture and what the challenges will be in the budget for next year.
Dr. Zillis, what other positions are open currently that we budgeted for that we just haven't been able to fill? Are there other, I think nurse?
A high school nurse has been a struggle as well.
Right.
That's kind of its own category for a few different reasons, but that is problematic right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think we have anything else open consistently right now.
Those 7 positions that you mentioned, were all of those hired as permanent positions, or were any of them hired with, hey, this is a temporary situation owing to the pandemic?
So any of those people hired were aware that the funding for these positions was coming out of ARP money. That doesn't mean we can make it a temporary position. So if we hire somebody full-time, it becomes a probationary position. But, you know, for some people, that was part of the dilemma of to accept a position or not, knowing that technically it was not part of our budgeted funding in the moment. So.
I guess, like, it's so hard once you know a person to let go of that person, so then your loyalty goes to them. But when Mr. Paschke explained the reasons behind needing a social worker, they certainly seemed very compelling.
Absolutely, absolutely, and I agree. And I don't want anyone to leave here thinking that we're not committed to trying to keep the positions that we have in ARP funding. That will present some challenges, and we might need to think about what do we trade off if we're valuing those positions. What's the trade-off in all of this? So I don't want to have anybody walk out of here with doom and gloom over this. And you know, each year we go through this process of suggestions coming forward that make perfect sense, but what is it that we can do with the resources that we have? I think the whole discussion about the athletic trainer, again, I'm not arguing against the benefits of an athletic trainer. I'm certainly not arguing against the benefits of a social worker. It's just how do we make that work in the moment with the variables that are in play.
So, I mean, along those lines, when we're looking at the, you know, kind of the pros and cons and the risks and benefits, you know, again, given kind of our understanding of social work, are we making our problem bigger or down the road? So we have all of these unmet social worker, you know, mental health needs. We're splitting. It's not just the high school, right? Because we're splitting a resource. So someone else is also getting shortchanged to get the little bit that we're. In 6 more months, are we going to have a bigger need? And it's going to go from 0.6 or 0.1 to 1 point something, because we're not addressing it before things snowball. So, I mean, that's part of my concern as well, is, okay, we can't do it, but are we gonna have a bigger price to pay later, in what form? How are we evaluating that?
Is that the sticks and time saves 9 kind of philosophy?
I don't know how we measure that, but if this is just getting bigger and we're, you know, we're not addressing it, could 6 months actually of support, and I understand to have that conversation, could that help in some way meet some need or get some students where they need to be to minimize the need later?
Yeah, and I think all those are valid questions. Again, I don't know how we exactly measure that, you know, and I think that was the mindset with the positions that we did add, is that regardless of where it's going, the benefit in the moment, we're gonna prioritize. So, I guess at some point I feel like, you know, where is the limit to that? I mean, to be honest, we could probably use several social workers in the district right now. We could probably use at least an additional administrator in the district right now. We talk about a variety of things, math coaches, literacy coaches. That would certainly be a benefit. We would love to do all of these things. It just becomes, what
Where's the
can we
triage
do
though? Are
now?
we in triage mode for some of these things? You know, I don't know.
Which again was the purpose, which is really the purpose of the ARP money. That,
Right.
so I don't have a concrete answer other than I'm trying to find that balance in there somewhere. And I get that, you know, there's a counter argument to be made, so.
Is there anything that we could go to the college for, their students, internships, hours, that sort of thing that might fill some sort of void? And also, I was wondering, do we know why there weren't applicants for that? Are we guessing that it was because it was a .6, or are there just a lack of just interest?
I don't know about interest, but just there's the mental health and the social services, there's such a high demand. So counselors, psychologists, social workers, it's very in demand. You know, many districts are seeking. And many are choosing to work in clinical settings because ARP monies and different types of fundings also went to different clinical settings. And so oftentimes people choose the clinical setting over a school setting.
But to be honest, when we started this, I mean, we got some really positive feedback. Mrs. Piper had given us the name of an organization that this is what they do. They connect mental health professionals with school districts and other agencies, and there was some real positive momentum there, and then we had somebody. And then
But
it
even,
all
you know,
kind of fell apart.
when we started with that process, we were all excited and got excited, and we're like, okay. They're like, okay, well, as soon as we hire somebody, we'll send them your way. And we were like, oh, wait, you don't have somebody? So even they were petitioning to try and find people, you know. So it was kind of like, at first, we were all excited, because we thought, oh, just by virtue of talking and getting the, you know, and all of that. And then it was like, well, as soon as we hire somebody, you know, we're trying to find people too. So even the outside agencies.
You know, we initially thought they had kind of a stockpile
Yeah.
of people who were waiting to be assigned somewhere.
Yeah, in a bullpen, we were like, we want number 23.
Yeah, so.
So it's been somewhat my philosophy as a board member to have these discussions and bring up concerns. But yet, I don't think, it's my opinion, none of the board members understand the issues of the district, the internal workings of the district, as well as our administrative team. You and our administrator, you understand, you see daily the needs, you see where it fits in with the budget, you see what the availability of these positions are. Whereas the board doesn't get into that on a daily basis. We've got our own lives and our own careers that we're looking at. These discussions, I think, are very important, but again, it's been my philosophy to say, I'm going to trust in our administrative team to analyze these things, to discuss them, to bring up points that the board has and consider that, but then you make the decision, you bring it to the board for recommendation, and if we feel that, you know, you've made all considerations, that's me. And I'm 1/7 of the board, and I understand that, but that's always the way that I felt that I've tried to work here. So I appreciate your work on this, and I understand you're working on it. You've taken a look at all of the, considered all the issues, budgetary also, and I appreciate that. Anything else? Okay. Which takes us to our final hearing from the public. Is there anyone who would like to address the board on any topic not on our agenda tonight? You guys don't have anything in the front row?
Just listening.
Just listening, okay, good. Okay. With that, Mr. Ziliak, your superintendent report.
Yeah, be brief. First of all, winter sports is up and running. Thank you to all the coaches and all our student athletes who are participating. It seems to be off to a good start. I also want to just throw out as awareness, we've been working behind the scenes for a couple months now on the idea of a wheel-lock only bus run in the afternoon. As it stands right now, buses pick up students at Wheelock. They bring those students to the main campus for the elementary dismissal. Many of those students, sometimes as many as 30, 35, need to transfer to a different bus here at the main campus to get them home, which requires a lot of person power and organization, and sometimes can be a little bit confusing based on parents calling at the last minute and going, oh, hey, instead of here, I need my son or daughter to go there. And I think we had at least an example of an error that, you know, inevitably possibly happens, although we do everything in our power to not allow that to happen. It's also that students from Wheelock leave their building roughly around 3:10, let's say 3:15, but then they come to the main campus and our buses don't roll out of here until about 3:35. So the students at Wheelock don't even really start heading home until they're on the bus for roughly a half hour. So we've been working on, is it possible to divert some of the runs to get 3, 4, 5 buses that would just go to Wheelock and take Wheelock students home? Now there's some complications that are inherent to that. As we started thinking through this, like families who have siblings who typically don't be on the bus together from the elementary school, and also that would include either a pre-K or K student. And what might that mean to a family if they're not arriving at the same time, and especially if the younger student was arriving before the older student, so on and so forth. So we've been trying to understand this. It seems like it's possible that this could work. But one of the things that we wanted to do is send out a survey to our pre-K through 4 families and saying, if something like this were to happen at some point this school year, maybe as soon as after break, maybe as soon as the semester, what complications would that bring to your family or to your situation? Just get a sense of what that feedback would be. Would we get 50 responses? Would we get 8 responses? I don't know, but I just wanted to make the board aware of that conversation, and certainly there wouldn't be a decision made without a conversation here and a chance for more input. I have a chance to sit down with Mr. Jollinger and Mrs. Piper later this week and kind of talk through that from their perspective and understand any concerns that they might have.
Can we anticipate that that is adding buses to that time of day? Like it would require additional buses, additional drivers, or we would be able to reallocate the existing number of buses?
Reallocate the existing buses, it would not have a cost. It'd be the same amount of buses, just configured differently.
Could you do one that would still do the run here for those kids who do have siblings and whose parents prefer that they keep with what's happening now, like a hybrid?
We could, that lessens the issue here, but still would create some transfers, probably. It'd be something we could consider, absolutely, yeah.
The idea here, though, is let's keep these kids from sitting around on a bus for a half hour
And transfer.
and transferring. So we're reducing the headache for the students and for the staff here, and we're making it easier on the student in the long run to get home.
And we've been kind of using the word streamlining or being more efficient. Ultimately, yes. You know, even if, you know, some concern was, well, this one run from Wheelock, some students wouldn't get home until 35 minutes after leaving Wheelock. And our response was, well, they're not even going home after 30 minutes right now. So that could be a plus, even if they're on that bus for, you know, a significant amount.
I really appreciate you considering this. I think it's a great response and creative, you know, looking at what the experience is and how we can make it better. So thank you for doing that.
It's been a team effort. Mr. Forbes has been involved in those conversations. First Student has been great. The person that we brought in to help us do the efficiency with the bus runs has been extremely helpful. So
That was actually my question. I was wondering if that was something that they detected or?
they were the initial, so what was his name? Pat? AJ? Well, before AJ.
Sean McCabe?
Sean. So initial, this idea started with the consultant who's still involved, but then a person from First Student picked up that part that is a little bit more in tune with the local area. So, yeah. Other than that, just wanted to, you know, we're at the 10-week point of the year. I wanted to thank everybody from our administrators to our teachers, to our office staff. Sometimes people get the report card and think like, oh, this is just something that happens every 10 weeks, but there's a lot of work and a lot of energy and a lot of organization that goes into getting those report card home. So thank you to everyone who's involved in that. Just want to take a minute to note some of the great things that have happened in this first 10 weeks. We got the school year off to a good start with our opening days. We wrapped up contracts with both the FAA and CSEA, which is always a positive. Our homecoming was fantastic, a lot of school spirit, a lot of energy in many of our games. You know, we got things, again, added an E&L teacher for Wheelock in the elementary, added a special ed teacher based on need. Our fall sports seasons were great. You know, I think the nice thing about this fall season was we had some teams really overachieve and teams really grow throughout the season and be in a much different place than they were when the season started. We've celebrated Students of the Month at a few different of our buildings. You know, we reinstated getting our audit committee, our policy committee, and our facilities committees back on a schedule. We're looking at moving forward with Leader and Me and making those adjustments and plans. We had some great PTO events, particularly at Wheelock in the elementary school. Our Spectator was just recently recognized for their fine work again this year. Our Health and Wellness Committee is back engaged in part of what we're doing. We had the National Honor Society and the Tri-Am Music Honor Society induction ceremonies. Our board is engaged in a couple of retreats to think about how we can be more efficient. We attended, many of us, the NISBA conference in Buffalo, thinking about, again, how we can operate more efficiently as a board. We had several of our administrative team go to the WASED conference in Arizona. which connects to the STEM work that we're doing in the district. The fall concerts were fantastic this year. We moved forward with our BCS to get us to this point tonight. Our Veterans Day celebration was great. Mrs. Tomaszewski again took a lead on that. The middle school musical was fantastic, and at least I was there Friday night, packed house. You know, so in all the trials and tribulations of a 10-week period, there's a lot of really good things happening. And I'm really proud to be here and be part of what's going on. And I definitely thank everybody, administrators, faculty and staff, our families, our community, the board, for just trying to keep everything rolling forward and trying to continue to offer, again, innovative, dynamic, and global learning experiences for our students. So, thanks to all.
And you even got part of the mission, vision, and core beliefs.
Here we go.
Thank you for being positive on that, and I think that, you know, with all the issues that we deal with sometimes, we forget about all the great things that are going on, and it's good to have that highlighted and moving forward. So thank you. So the next Board of Education meeting will be 2 weeks from tonight, 6 o'clock, right here in the high school library. Our audit committee, Ms. Gallo and Ms. Alfortna, if you want to stick around just after the meeting so we can reschedule that, because we'd like to get something before the next meeting, if
That would be
possible.
helpful.
Okay. But anyway. So, sorry, Mr. Johnson, I'm starting out with you again.
No, a lot of great things going on in the first quarter. And thank you for the synopsis about, you know, social worker and the challenges of our ARP money drying up a little bit and what we're going to do. And, you know, I take on board what you said, Mr. Aldrich. My 1/7 is also that, you know, I think we ask good questions as a board. We really do. But at the end of the day, you're the expert. You're on the ground. You're seeing everything. And I lean on your recommendation, and I thank you, and I thank Dr. Wright, I thank the administrators. I think as a team, you all come up with the best possible plan, so thank you for that. One other thing is, Ms. Starkey and I went to National School Boards Association conference up in Buffalo, and I know that she got quite a, you know, you probably speak on it, but I really learned a lot. I realized how much I didn't know by attending, and I'd recommend any of you next year, if, you know, we can. Professional development was very good.
That conference is usually in New York City, if that helps anyone.
Yeah. My son goes there, so.
Ms. Gullo? Nothing? Ms. Palford?
I just want to, you know, I think the architect report out tonight, I think, really set the tone that this is the beginning, and we can imagine a lot, and I think that's exciting. I think, you know, getting started and getting that feedback is going to be really important within the context of what's realistic as well.
Let's go. Moving forward. Yeah. Mr. Marshall?
Just to echo exactly what you said, we're at the beginning, so there's a lot of work left to do, but that's what we're here for. And then congrats to the musical. It was fantastic, so congrats to everyone involved.
Yeah, it was great to just have some movement on the capital project, and for next steps, we had talked about maybe scheduling the board workshop. So if we can do that, and then I don't know who or how we look into this thought exchange thing that I heard a lot about at NISBA, and it sounds like this amazing way to survey the community, way beyond like a normal survey. So if we could look into that, that would be great. Thank you.
Couple things. One, I want to thank the board for supporting when our idea is to propose with hiring a full-time network technician that has been integral into the work we're doing in the school and supporting all that needs to be done, future planning. We heard a lot tonight about the building condition survey, well, infrastructure and wiring and all of those sorts of things. And so that's really been important. So I thank you for that. And having our instructional technology specialist has been great. Andy Wheelock has been attending faculty meetings, meeting with teachers. He's supporting different initiatives, newsletters that are going out, and just really helping lift in the way that we wanted to lift with a lot of those goals. So that's been very exciting. And then other things that we use the ARP money for also include a lot of flexible seating options. And so it's really neat if you're over in Wheelock to see in the classrooms, the teachers are just embracing all these new things, and the students are loving them. And that was part of what the ARP was intended to do, is those social emotional learning things, the regulation, helping kids with the core strength and fine motor and things like that. Other things we did is we bought lots of different things for the sensory rooms in both the elementary and at Wheelock, different STEM items and supporting the STEM initiative in the classroom as well as with the STEM teacher, and then lots of titles of, with books that are bilingual. So we have a lot of things like that, and then a whole cadre that our Hispanic outreach coordinator can now use, and we have a staff to use for kindergarten and for screenings and to build those bridges and things like that. So students in the classroom get the exposure to them in a different language, and so the incoming students will as well. So it's been exciting to see some of those things and to see them directly with the students. A lot of new furniture that can go inside, outside at Wheelock, and the library, these really cool cubicles with clouds so kids can have that need that sensory or those quieter places or that feel lost in the larger spaces. So working to help them find tools and ways to regulate so that they can, find their way and be their best selves. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to jump over Mr. Forbes.
Nothing today.
Nothing today. Huh. That's so out of cue. Huh. Ms. Piper.
You guys haven't seen me for a while, so I got a couple things. So, we were fortunate to have a friendship feast for our UPK and kindergarten students before Thanksgiving, and all of the kids gathered in the cafeteria. Our PTO provided pizza. The cafeteria provided some carrot sticks and applesauce and pumpkin bread, and the kids all made placemats and got together as a grade level, and we made sure they sat by somebody they didn't know. And so they spent the time being able to talk and mix and oh, I know you from soccer, oh, I saw you trick-or-treating, and it was just a great way to build that friendship and sense of community at Wheelock. So that was wonderful. The first snow today, the kids were outside, they were having a blast, it was great to see them. They also were able to visit Pete the Cat. Had a show at Rockefeller Center today, and if any of you are familiar with Pete the Cat, like the best ever. We happen to love Pete the Cat at Wheelock, and so they were able to go see the show today for both pre-K and kindergarten. Shout out about Erin Lamp, our new ENL teacher. I cannot thank you enough. This woman is doing amazing things at Wheelock. She had our ENL students outside today, in the snow, talking different languages, pointing out things. She's just a vibrant personality, and so grateful to have her at Wheelock. She's really up the ante. She's doing a great job. Thank you to Brad and to John about looking at the buses from Wheelock. It's something we've been asking for a couple of years. Watching the faces of these 4-year-olds get on buses, knowing they have to transfer, and the tears at dismissal breaks your heart because they don't always know what's happening and they're afraid about having to transfer. So that's a piece that we see every day, and so I'm grateful that you're taking a look at that. Because we were also fortunate to have 6 of us go to the National Early Childhood Conference in Nashville a couple of weeks ago, and the sessions on trauma and behavior were overflowing, standing room only. They couldn't fit people in across the country. There were 9,000 people at this conference, and those sessions everywhere. The trauma, the needs of students and children are way different than we've ever seen before. And we feel at times that we are helpless because we don't know how to meet those needs and what to do for those students. And so to hear that from people across the country and what's happening, and to say, have those brainstorming sessions, we know we came away with some ideas, but and some networking, but it's difficult sometimes to not really be able to help kids, and they're looking to you, and they can't always speak at 4 and 5. So it was a powerful conference. It was one of the best I've ever been at. So thank you to the board for allowing us to do that.
Great. Ms. Farrell.
Thanks. I wanted to thank Christy Leon for coming forward tonight and talking about accessibility of our playgrounds. I think that's a really important issue, and it's a conversation to me that's worthy of gaining some momentum, so I hope that it does. You know, and I think just creating an accessible outdoor space really embraces celebrating our diversity and inclusion, obviously. So, so thank you. And on a exciting note, on Friday, December 1st, this coming Friday, is the Polar Plunge. So we have about 30 students and staff that are going to be dipping their toes into Lake Erie at Woodlawn Beach State Park at 4 o'clock. And it's a fundraiser for Special Olympics of New York State and Unified Sports, and I think right now we're about $4,500 raised. So.
Great. Do you have a goal?
For the fundraising?
Yeah.
There is a goal, I can't remember, but it's surpassed. The
Oh, it has?
goal was
Really?
maybe 3,000, 3,500.
Wonderful.
I
We
can't
started,
remember.
I think, at 3 and surpassed that, and then last I heard they were aiming for 5, but I don't know totals yet.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and there's still time to donate if you're so inclined.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Derowinski.
Well, I just want to give a big thank you to our PE teacher, Frank Briandi. He filled out an online application through the Buffalo Sabres to win a chance at something they call Students of the Game, and our school was selected. I think it was, 15 or 20 elementary schools that got chosen. Ours was lucky enough to get selected. So the past 2 days, representatives from the Sabres have been here. They've taken over our PE classes. All students earned a t-shirt. They got a free voucher for an upcoming Sabres game. And if they attend that game, they'll get an autographed puck. And our school received some floor hockey equipment that we didn't have before. So the kids were super pumped, and they were all wearing their yellow shirts. So it was a really good energy for the past couple of days.
Great.
And we loved it. So it was really cool. So Frank Briandi and the rest of the PE department, I just want to thank them very much. So it was cool.
Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, it was exciting.
That is. Yeah. Mr. Paskey.
Since Paul is not here, I just wanted to mention that the middle school winter concert is coming up on December 5th. December 8th, we're going to be asking high school staff and students not to park in the event's entrance parking lot because the elementary concert is at 1 p.m., so we want to save spaces for that. Our high school winter concert is on the 13th, so you're all invited to that. It's exciting. We're looking forward to another awesome music event. We have Spirit Week for sports, for our Winter Spirit Week. It's going to start on December 18th, taking us right up to the end of our December days as we head into our vacation. We also have an upcoming Cookies and Cocoa event for our positive behavior interventions, where we have teachers that recognize students for being positive, and we invite them to a Cookies and Cocoa event where we have teachers who volunteer to make cutout cookies, plain, and we have frosting stations and all the cool things that they can use to decorate the cookies, and we just have a nice time having hot chocolate and cookies with our kids. We started today with announcements for midterm exams and Regents exams in January, which is kind of crazy, but I want to be a little bit proactive this year and have the kids thinking about it as we get into the holiday season. There's a lot going on, and I just wanted to keep the kids a little bit focused and say, hey, you know what? We have a goal at the mid-year where we're going to be measuring how much we learned in the first half and to kind of get some excitement behind that and keep that in focus while we're having some fun with the holiday season. I want to thank the board for talking tonight about the social worker. I think it's a very important and continued discussion that we need to have. I do think that we have at least one person who has expressed interest in a full-time position. So at least there's a person out there that I think that we might be able to get if that is a consideration. But yeah, I think that we do need to continue to look at that. And I know it's a difficult conversation for Dr. Ziliak. I don't want anyone to leave here thinking that Dr. Ziliak is like, I don't believe that we should have a social worker, okay? Because he doesn't feel that way. And I understand that there are two sides to the equation. But I think also we stated that a stitch in time saves 9. It does, and just being able to be proactive and maybe save some problems from getting bigger down the road is an important thing to consider as well. So thank you for the continued conversation. Appreciate it.
Okay. Well, thank you. If there's no other business, then if I could get a motion to dismiss.
So moved.
And a second. All I will just, all those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? We are dismissed.
You guys mind just like grabbing a new copy and bring one of these into the box?
We're gonna do the workshop date and.
Okay, yeah.
Good job.
Good, how are you?
This kid will move over, he's still in shorts.
I just worked out, I had to go home fast. I could go home and change.
Oh, and are you still going two-handed?
Oh, yeah. Yep. Yeah, me too.
Yes.
And Jack.
And, he brought a fresh duck on his niece lab, so.
Oh,